Hello and welcome to Small Cap Nation. I'm Jane King at the NASDAQ market site in Times Square. And with me today, Michael Kramer, founder of Mott Capital. And we just recently got a monthly jobs report.
Right,
a little
today.
bit weaker than expected.
Sure.
This is for the month of April, 160,000 jobs added. You've done a lot of analysis on the job market in these monthly reports. Kind of give me an overview of how you see the job market and how it compares to what we hear from the Labor Department.
Right. So the job numbers that we hear today, for example, was 160,000. Expectations were 200,000. It feels like every month the expectation's 200,000. But what they never tell you, and when they talk about all these job numbers that we see, is what's the size of the population that we're talking about? You know, if you think about it, last year we created about 2.7, 2.8 million jobs, and that sounds like a big number. But think about it in terms of the actual size of the labor force, the people participating in this population. And if you go back, so I did a lot of analysis to the 1950s, and we've actually been creating the same number of jobs since 1950, right? Every year, if you look at the chart, you can see that almost every single year we're creating 2-3 million jobs, and then we have a dip during the recessions and it comes back up. But we had 60 million people in the population in 1950.
So the idea is we should be creating more jobs because we have more of a population than we did.
Sure. I mean, in essence, right, if you have more people in the labor force, you need to create more jobs to keep people working, right? So if you just look through the numbers, in 1950, we were producing about 5% of jobs were in the labor force, right? So if we produce 3 million jobs, that represented about 5% of the labor force. Today, if we create 3 million jobs, it represents less than 2% of the labor force. So in reality, in the 1980s, 1990s, we were averaging about 2.5 to 3%. We need to be creating like 350 to 400,000 jobs a month. And we're just nowhere near that.
We're just not even growing.
No.
I mean, GDP, nothing is like showing growth. And the jobs report is interesting because you really got to dig into it to get a true sense. There's wages in there. There's people who drop out of the workforce.
Right.
There's all these kind of other things that it tells you.
Sure.
All this data that you can really find about how we're really doing.
Right. I mean, so if you look at the labor participation rate, it fell off around 2008. It's basically sitting at 40-year lows. So you had a massive run-up in labor participation in the 70s and 80s as you started to have this advent of the woman really entering the workforce and this dual income family developing. And then in the 90s and 2000s, it almost became a necessity to have two people working at home. But then all of a sudden around 2008, it just started falling off. And so I really wondered what was driving that. I think the easy explanation was, oh, well, baby boomers are starting to retire, and this is all what's driving the labor participation rate lower. In reality, what's actually happening, from what I can tell, is that the size of the population is growing, but we're just not producing enough jobs to keep the participation rate higher. So that's why you've seen this fall off from 68% to 62% over the last 8 years or so. And that's really where you really can start seeing some of this, where it's just not enough.
Yeah, and wages haven't really grown much. I mean,
No.
for the past 15 years, there's a lot of people in this country, they're making the same amount of money.
They're making the same or they're making less
Yeah.
in some cases. And the problem is if you look at U6 unemployment, which I really view as the true unemployment number, which includes headline and then you add in discouraged workers and workers taking a part-time job for economic reasons, it's at 10%, right? Not at 5%.
So that's what you would say the true unemployment rate is?
Yeah, it's
about
somewhere
10%.
more closer to 10% because the U3 number that we hear only counts if you've been looking for a job in the last 4 weeks.
Right.
After that, they don't even count you anymore.
Yeah.
So I don't really view that as a true number.
Now, of course, we're entering a political season, or we've been in it for
Sure.
6 months, but we're getting into the general election. So these numbers have a lot of political influence.
Right.
And already there's spin from both sides about this. I mean, do you have any thoughts on that? I mean, I'm not asking for a political opinion or who you're going to vote for, but how do you see the landscape?
So I think, if anything, what we've seen so far from the nomination processes that we've been having going on is that Americans are just frustrated. They realize the economy's not good. They're not really believing the numbers that they're hearing, and you can see it because Donald Trump's the presumptive nominee for the Republicans, and Bernie Sanders has been doing much better than I think anyone would have thought against Hillary.
He's leading in California or close to
Right.
it, or it's competitive.
It's very competitive, and it's because people are fed up with the economic picture, and I think that things aren't really as good as the numbers they try to indicate.
Yeah. Now, there's been a lot of talk about the trade deals, both from Trump and Bernie Sanders,
Right.
and how that has led to some of this stagnation.
Right.
I mean, do you think that's true?
So I think that's part of the reason. I think the other part of the reason is that when we hit the recession in 2008, people started slashing workforces, and they began to realize that automation and technology could replace a handful of their workers. I mean, we'll just look in the financial services industry. Look at size of trading desks before the New York Stock Exchange, how automation and technology has really allowed those types of things to really shrink, and those jobs don't come back because the machines are doing it now, right? And it's the same, I believe that's really the same exact thing happening all over the country.
Interesting. And even fast food workers are impacted by this. I mean, you're going to be able to go and just order your, McDonald's at a kiosk.
Right.
And,
Well, I mean,
especially with all the minimum wage push, I mean, a lot of franchisees may just go, look, I mean,
right.
it's
I mean,
a lot cheaper.
Look at what happens at the banks, right? ATM machines. You used to go into a bank and there would
Right.
be 5 tellers. Now you have 5 ATM machines and 1 teller, right? So that's just the way of the world.
Yeah.
As technology advances, jobs change. It happened in the 1900s, though, when we went through the Industrial Revolution. How
and
many?
we figured it out.
Exactly.
Exactly.
I mean, how many people did you have who were, blacksmiths who were making shoes for horses? Like when the car came along, what was the demand for a horseshoe at the time?
Sure.
It just changes. The landscape changes.
We're just
and we're
going
changing.
through that big structural change right now.
Right.
I think, and it's tough.
Right.
It's very tough, but it's happening, and you got to figure things out. So
Right.
thank you so much,
No problem.
Michael, for
Thank you.
explaining this. And thank you as well for joining us on Small Cap Nation. For more interesting interviews about business and economics, you can go to smallcapnation.com.